ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the District 61 webinar. Tonight's webinar is presented by Kimberly Dueck, Distinguished Toastmaster, and the title is Recruiting New Members. Kimberly, take it away.
Great. Thanks so much, Craig. Well, everyone, thanks so much for joining tonight. This is one of just my most favorite topics. It's such a near and dear topic for me. I really enjoy recruiting, especially when it comes to Toastmasters. Toastmasters has done so much for me in my career that I really enjoy reaching out to other people and sharing my story with them, and hopefully I can help others experience some of the same benefits that I've gone through. I've experienced a lot of fun success stories. I've started a new club, the Ottawa Young Professionals. I've also helped a few other clubs boost their membership. So tonight I'm going to focus on a few key areas that I've found have worked over the last few experiences that I've gone through. In terms of the topics for tonight, my key area that I want to focus on with you is the mailing list, so creating one, maintaining and using, but we'll also touch on a few of these other topics when it comes to attracting people to your club and how to do that. Well, let's get started here talking about mailing lists, or maybe I should call it emailing lists in this day and age. We really want to focus on how do we keep in touch with everybody who's expressed an interest in our club. I was thinking about this the other day, and I think, well, you know, the first time someone hears about Toastmasters, they probably need to hear about it a few more times before they make that decision to come visit your club. And then maybe they need a couple more visits to your club before they take that plunge and become a member. So if you think about that, that's quite a bit of time that can potentially elapse between the first time they've first heard about Toastmasters to becoming an actual member. So what happens in between that? Well, if you have them on your mailing list or your emailing list, you can actually send them some friendly reminders, some gentle nudges. Maybe tell them about some special events that's coming up. So I will say, in my experience, having that personal touch, putting a voice to your club online presence is so important to engaging people even before they think about visiting your club. So who should be on your mailing list? Well, of course, you want to keep in touch with your former members. Maybe there's special events they'd like to attend. Maybe they stopped being a member for a period of time, but they maybe will come back. I think it's important to keep in touch with them. Of course, any guests that have visited your club, you want to make sure you keep in touch with them as well. And then really anyone else who's shown an interest, whether it's through your social media, your website, any one-on-one discussion you've had with colleagues at work. Really, you want to try to always get their email address from them so that you can keep in touch with them and let them know what's happening with your club. So some of the tools that I have used with a lot of success, Eventbrite I really like. It's free, so the price is right with that one. I like using that in conjunction with all of my other advertising mediums. So that one you can use the address related to Eventbrite and post that either through your social media or on your website, and you just ask people to RSVP for your event. And by doing that, you'll get their email address as well. Using the guest book or the sign-in sheets at your meeting. This is again at the meeting. On guest book I use more so on an ongoing basis. So if you have a drop-in or a guest that comes, maybe not for a special event, just for a regular club event, so important to make sure you keep track of anyone who has attended your club. They might not join the first time they visit, but you definitely want to have contact with them. And the sign-in sheets, again, that refers back to probably all the email addresses that you achieve to attract during your event advertising. So you want to take all the email addresses from your Eventbrite and then have a sign-in sheet so you can track who has expressed interest and who in fact actually showed up. And one thing I'll also mention about Eventbrite is I expect usually about a third will show up. You know, again, because it's free, it's really easy for them to get a ticket. which is great for us in building our mailing list, but they may or may not actually physically show up that first time they express that interest. So it's important that you keep track of both who has shown up and who's expressed interest. And the last tool I want to talk about is this free Toast host, which is what a lot of Toastmasters clubs are using. Within the admin portal of the website, there is a membership management option in there, and that's where you can input email addresses. It's how you give your members access to the website, the club website, but it's also a place that you can insert guests. So not the members tab, but the guests tab. And the thing that I really like about using that tool is that it automatically manages the consent requirement for you. So if you add an email to that list, you will also be able to, it will ask if they're okay with being added to that list. And then anytime that you send out an email using that list, it will give them the automatic opt-out at the end, which is also a requirement as well if you're using mailing lists. And like I say, that tool is very handy because you also don't have to be dealing with all these email addresses. Some of my mailing lists are upwards of 150 people, so it's very nice just to pop in the guests one email item from your club website. So again, that club website, free Toast host, great option for more of the ongoing aspect of managing your mailing list. So here's another topic that may not be considered as much by a lot of Toastmasters Club. And I totally get it. We say, come one, come all, we will accept everybody. I 100% agree with that, except when it comes to marketing. I think it's really important that you focus when you're marketing because it really gets difficult if you're spreading your net too wide. I have a little quote here that I like to say at the bottom. When you focus on everything, nothing gets done. I like to say each club has their own niche target market that they will attract. I think people come to Toastmasters because of the program. Of course, it's a great program, but I think they end up staying with your club longer term, 1+2, any period of time, because of the friendships and the community that's formed when you have common interests and goals that you're talking about in your speeches or maybe in post-toasties. I think those are the things that you want to focus on as a club. So who is it that we really are trying to target when we're advertising a special event or the club in general? This is another thing, create an attraction. Some of us may not realize this because we just love Toastmasters so much, but there still are many people out there that have never heard of Toastmasters. I know it's shocking, but it's a fact. And the other thing to keep in mind is that not everybody knows, if they've heard of Toastmasters, maybe they don't necessarily have the right perception about it, or they don't really have that personal connection to what their life goals are. So I like to create an attraction that, again, creates that focus with your advertising. A special meeting could be an open house. I use open houses extensively when I'm trying to really focus on increasing my membership. I think open houses are great because you can focus your members as well, make sure that all the members are attending that meeting. If your club has low membership, you can also recruit other Toastmasters from other clubs to come in and just try and help make this a special event with a lot of energy, a lot of people, which makes your guests feel that much more energized and interested in coming back. Social events are also fun, have a little bit more of an informal setting. This is actually how I joined Toastmasters, was in a barbecue in the park, and I just found it was a lot more laid back. Maybe you got to know the members a little better through that. You could have a golf event, whatever the case may be. Social events, especially in the summer when things slow down a little bit, they're a lot of fun to have and attract some potential future members for you. For corporate clubs out there, the information session is fabulous. That one there we use as a lunch and learn, or at some point during the day, just to share actually the information about Toastmasters. So it's not an actual formal meeting. It's more so targeted on helping people understand what Toastmasters is all about. So that's the meeting aspect. And then within your meeting, I would suggest recruiting a well-known or subject matter type guest keynote speaker. So for corporate clubs, what's worked really well in the club that I've helped out is attracting a senior executive to come and speak at your club. You'd be surprised how willing they are to do this sort of thing. I know we often feel nervous about asking them to do that, but the reality is Toastmasters is usually well known with senior executives, and it's also a great way to let them know, hey, this is how the club's doing. And everybody seems to want to come and hear a senior executive speak. So that's my tip for the corporate clubs. For community clubs, it's great to bring in a subject matter expert. For example, my home club, we had a professional headhunter come in, and she spoke about creating your personal brand on social media, which leads me to my third point here is also not only do you have a special keynote speaker that is there just by nature of who they are will attract people, but also the subject matter that they're going to speak about. And you want to pick a subject matter that's very relevant, again, to your target market that you have identified, as I mentioned earlier. I like to also keep it very relevant to Toastmasters as well. So last fall, we had a membership drive. We had a few open houses. We had a few different senior executives come and visit. And they talked about different things from impromptu speaking to giving feedback and how all of that supports leadership development, which is so important. Because I do think a lot of people realize it's public speaking, but I think that leadership development aspect of Toastmasters is sometimes not emphasized enough. So I think it's great to add that as a key topic for the attraction. Advertising. Well, this one here probably could be its own webinar unto itself. So I will do my best to touch on what the main areas I think that you should think about. As I've mentioned with the focus, you want to also grab your potential guests' attention. So what's in it for them? So by picking a keynote speaker that is of interest to them with a topic that is meaningful to what they probably want to achieve in their career or in their life. I also really like to use pictures. So if that guest speaker is a celebrity of sorts or a senior executive, use their picture, put that up on all of your advertisements. I think that always grabs someone's attention way more than a bunch of words. And use that Eventbrite. Again, I use that extensively in conjunction with my social media, with my website, driving them to giving their email address. I've mentioned this before in a different talk that I've done. Existing networks, that is such a powerful way to leverage what's already existing out there. So on social media, you'll often find, if you've been intentional, I guess, in identifying who your target market is, you'll often find there's networks on social media that have already engaged your target market. And maybe it's more just an online forum for them to post different comments or whatever, but you can often find complementary networks that maybe they don't get together in person, or Toastmasters comes in, there's an opportunity for skills development, actual networking in person. I think there's great synergies that you can find if you find the right network on social media, and that can be very quick. Also with the corporate club at my workplace, we have a network for new hires, for example. So we were able to leverage their mailing list to invite them to an information session, which really boosted membership. Actually, our first information session, we had over 75 people come and check it out. So again, using the existing networks out there, their network are already engaged and interested in similar areas as what you're targeting as well. So that's a great tool to use. Posters, again, I use that especially with corporate clubs. Put them wherever there's lots of traffic. So if you have elevators, put them up by the elevators, lunchrooms, that sort of thing. You can also put them up around the community for you community clubs out there. Word of mouth, again, getting your members engaged with helping spread the word. That's a great way to advertise. And last, of course, social media. I mean, there's many ways you can do this, but Facebook's another one that's worked really well for me. Using well, of course, you should have a club site on Facebook. That's first things. It's very easy to use, easy to post pictures, great for members to post comments. And you can also create events on Facebook on your page as well. And then that event can be shared by your members. You can share it on the District 61 page, or you can share it on the network that I mentioned there, other social media pages. The other option I really like on Facebook, it does cost a little bit of money, is you can also boost that event. You can then identify some target words that you wanted to focus on in the advertisement. You can also select a specific geographical range for it to target as well. So that's another great option to use. And then LinkedIn is, of course, another great medium. I find the advertising on there a little bit more expensive, so I don't use that as much. But I do a lot of cold calling individual one-on-one through LinkedIn. So that's another option. Many more out there. Like I said, we could go on all day about this one, but there's just some ideas for you to consider. Active communication. When you have people that see your website, your social media page, that's all great. But you want to add a voice to that. So if you're noticing that people are liking your event, reach out to them. Send them a message. Become friends with them on Facebook or through LinkedIn. Put that personal touch on there well in advance. Just acknowledge that they've expressed an interest. If they haven't already RSVP'd through Eventbrite, suggest, hey, here's my link to Eventbrite. Please do RSVP. We'd love to continue to have contact with you. Again, just puts that personal touch and lets people know that you're excited to meet them, and it draws them even more. And then 5 to 7 days ahead of the event, about a week ahead, I like to use that time to, again, engage anyone who's expressed an interest. Send them information about Toastmasters. So there's some great videos out there that Toastmasters has on their website that I find really helpful. If you just put that link into that email, and you can send information about your club, when you meet, maybe some testimonials. I wouldn't make it a very long email, but just something that allows them to start thinking about what is this Toastmasters? And then a couple of days before your event, I would send more specific details about the event itself. So if there's some parking information they need to know, or directions to how to get to that room in the building if it's a bit confusing, things like that. Again, each of these things are meant to be little nudges and back to the personal touch throughout your advertising campaign. And this is at the heart of it. Once you have everybody's email addresses, you then want to add that personal touch after the event is complete. So this is where keeping track of who's actually attended is so important, because you want to send them a follow-up and say, hey, thanks for joining us. Maybe talk a bit about if there was some fun thing that happened at the event, just to personalize it a bit. And this is where I like to give a very easy medium for them to join as a member. So send them the membership form, and also one thing that I have found very successful is giving them the option to do an e-transfer, to send their dues directly to you through the email, your club email address. I find that you just make it so easy for them to become a member. That's a great way to do it. Don't make that email very long. Make it very to the point. Again, thank them for attending and giving them that easy information about how to join. Another thing that I like to do with our membership forms is I add a bit of a table to it, which shows by month the declining amount throughout the year of how much the dues are per month for both a new member and also existing members. As you know, new members have to pay that little bit of an extra fee there. So I think it's really beneficial to have that as part of your membership form, because otherwise you're depending on your members to remember what that number is, and that amount changes every month, as we know. So it gets kind of difficult to remember that. So it's great to add that right onto your form. And then for those that didn't actually attend your event, but again, you got their email address through Eventbrite or other means, you want to send a little "sorry we missed you." Again, it's just that little extra touch, that personal touch that makes them feel special, makes them, maybe they just had something come up. Very often that happens. As I mentioned, maybe a third will show up of all the emails that you get through Eventbrite. So you want to make sure that you touch base with them. And again, to put them on your mailing list, you want to make sure that they give you their consent. So you've gotten their consent for the event itself on Eventbrite, but again, if you want to add them to your mailing list for future events, you need to make sure that they respond to you and indicate that they are okay with you contacting them. So again, I make that email super easy. I just say in the bottom, just reply yes if you'd like to hear about future events. And of course, take the opportunity to tell them about what future events are coming, just that one time. And then anyone who replies yes, you have their permission to add to your emailing list. So I know that was a lot of information. I just want to throw it out there. I am available anytime. I am very passionate about this topic, and I have experienced so many different types of, well, I guess not everything's been a success. We've experimented with all kinds, but if you have any need for ideas or anything like that, please do reach out to me. I am available through Facebook, also through the Division D email account, as well, as you can see at the bottom there. So I am going to now open this up for any questions that anybody has.
Hi, Kim, it's Will here. I have a question. I'd like to ask you if you'd if you could give me an overview of kind of phases the club would go through and what they would have to change as they grow. I mean, some clubs start out really small and they would have different activities or different focuses when there are 6 or 12 members, and they might change their focus as they get larger. Is this something which is fairly well known, and can you go over these aspects of it?
And are you asking from a recruiting standpoint or just in general terms?
I'm asking from a standpoint of running the club. So we seem to be growing a little bit. We're getting close to 20, and as we grow past 20, which is a possibility, we don't know yet, but what types of changes would you expect in a club going from, say, 15 to 25 members and beyond?
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, first of all, I will say if you can get yourself to 20, that's a great number to work with. I think ideally you want to try and get to 25. Once you hit 25, there is going to be expected turnover with the club. So you can factor a little bit of that with the 25 marker. I think in terms of once you get over 20 members, I think word of mouth and just the energy of the club changes, and it gets a lot easier. I think for the clubs out there that are below 10, there's a lot more effort required and a lot more required of each member, and more often than not, each member is also a member of the club executive. So those clubs out there, again, I would recommend please ask for a club coach, because you can use all the help you can get, because it is a lot more required of each individual member when you're at a lower membership from that standpoint. So it can get tiring. That's why I suggest focusing as well, because if you're constantly trying to bring in members every single meeting, I mean, that's great, but again, if you're at the lower numbers, it gets a little more difficult to do that. So that's why having these special events is especially powerful, I think, for the lower membership clubs in particular. And you can also ask other Toastmasters from the district to come and help out. So for the lower membership, that's what I have to say about that. And then as you get towards 20, I think it starts getting a little easier. I think there's just more word of mouth that happens. I think the energy of the club just starts to change when you attend those meetings. I mean, there's great energetic meetings that happen with less than 10, but the energy in general, just the room gets more filled with it. So I think it gets easier as you have as you get closer to 20, and then of course when you get to 25. So that's from a recruiting standpoint, that's my thoughts about the different levels.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
My club is having an event this week coming up. The event kind of grew without most of us controlling it, and we now appear to be having more visiting Toastmasters going to show up than we will probably get for anywhere near the guests. One of the members expressed concern over that today with me, because the fact that the people that are visiting Toastmasters are not going to be very appreciative of the fact that there's only 2 or 3 other people actually showing up. How do we deal with that and keep everybody happy in the whole show?
I think I'm trying to understand the question. So is the concern that there's going to be so many Toastmasters there that the guests will be overwhelmed with how many are there, or is the room not big enough, or what? I'm not sure I understand the question.
To some degree, but mostly what we're concerned about is the fact that the visiting Toastmasters are going. It's a waste of their time to show up.
Okay, that's an interesting challenge. I don't know that I've encountered that before, but I would say I'm a big fan of communicating with those Toastmasters ahead of time. So if you think that that might be a challenge, I'd probably reach out to anyone that you're aware is visiting and say, hey, we're trying to attract a lot of guests to this event. So we would love your help with attracting more guests. And could we count on you to also help us in making our guests feel welcome? But if they aren't there to help you with the guests, maybe encourage them to come to another meeting. So you could also say, hey, we have this other event coming up. That one might be a lot more fun for you to join as an experienced member. So just do it in a positive way, but you can always nudge them one way or the other depending where you want to focus, I guess, for your event.
Kimberly.
Yes.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your strategy for converting people from guests into members. How does that go?
Yeah, for sure. Like I say, I think the most important, there is a whole educational on this topic, which again could be another webinar too, but for me, what I mentioned, the follow-up after they have visited, I know a lot of clubs don't necessarily like to broach the subject of joining when they first visit. I am not that way. I do make it very personable. Like I will approach the guest and maybe ask them what had them interested in coming to visit. So start to get an idea as to what their goals are, and then talk about how the program can help them achieve those goals. Another little tidbit I like to mention to everybody is, if possible, don't make them feel pressured, but try to get your guests doing table topics. So I will always, always, always have table topics in my open houses, and like a lot of them. So I'll have my keynote, that's probably the only speech I'll have, and then I'll have a lot of opportunity for table topics. And so, give them the little nudge and say, hey, just introduce yourself or something to just get them talking, because that's a bit of a hook, I think, for people to realize, oh, this is what this is about. They get that experience in that first time that they come to the meeting. Again, don't force them, but I think that's another way of really engaging them and making them realize, oh, this is what I could experience, and I know I have something to work on. So I think that aspect, and then as I mentioned before, making joining actually super easy. So if you have that guest package when they visit your open house, and then again in your follow-up email afterwards, with your registration form being super easy to use with that e-transfer, I think we've had a lot of success. Like I mentioned, one of my corporate clubs, we went from 6 members to 22 in a span of just under 2 months. So those were many of the techniques that we used to make that happen.
You visit some clubs and it feels like there's a funeral happening.
Oh.
So the comment today was, we're structured, we're fast, and yet we have a whole pile of fun. And just wondering about your experiences with that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you can have fun even if there's just 2 members there. I mean, you can restructure the agenda. I think a lot of clubs feel like they're absolutely married to the structure of the agenda that they have used for years and years. And I'll tell you, I visited a lot of clubs, and I think that structure can change. There's some key things you want to have on there, but you know, I've seen all kinds of meetings that you can have a lot of fun with it. For your special events, though, I think it's really important to try and attract a larger group, and I think 10 plus is always a good number to have, and try to make it fun. So whether you use a fun theme for the meeting, or which can then tie into the word of the day. So if you have a good theme, you can tie that to the word of the day, into your table topics, even into your speeches. So I think picking a fun theme can influence that. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that I've seen over the years that has worked really well. So, but good question. I think you can play with your agenda. That's one easy way to work with that for sure.
Thank you.
Kim, I have a follow-up question on that. As far as adjusting agenda, in the nearly a year since I've been with my club, I think we've had pretty much the same agenda, but it does seem fairly lively. It's probably best to try something new now and again. How would you suggest getting ideas for what type of new things to try out? I guess you can always visit another club, but is there some way of exchanging ideas aside from going to a club and seeing how they run their evening?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you can also go online. There's probably all kinds of forums online. There's also a Toastmasters International or District 61 Facebook pages that you can put those questions out there. One thing we did as our club, together with, I'm trying to remember what, we did a feedback session actually with our club, and we asked everybody what they liked about the meeting, what parts they'd like to see more of. You know, we came across sometimes where members weren't getting to speak as often as they wanted to, so we just had one full meeting on a speechathon. So we cut out most of the roles except for the speeches and the evaluations. So you can definitely get feedback from your members and get creative. The reality is the Toastmaster for the day can probably change up that agenda as they'd like. You know, if you want to do it on a more permanent basis, you probably should vote on it as a club. But, you know, I think there's a lot of opportunities to interact with other Toastmasters through online forums as well as, but I mean, visiting other clubs, it's so much fun. Like, Toastmasters are so passionate, and it's so great to meet them. You can also, of course, go to the TLI or the district conference. Great way to share ideas and talk about what's working in other clubs as well. So lots of opportunities to try different things for sure.
Good, you just motivated me to attend a few other club meetings, so thanks.
And for those of you that don't realize this, there is actually a Find a Club option on Toastmasters International website. You'll see that it actually says Find a Club. So if you have an area that, you know, where you're close to where you're working or whatever, you just put your postal code in, and it will actually tell you a list of clubs that are within a certain kilometer radius of that point, and it will tell you right there as well when and where they meet. So it's a fun option tool that I use as well. When I want to go and visit some other clubs.
Hi, I belong to a government club that meets at lunch, and I know that we're several agencies that meet, that come together, and we let them know that if they tell their supervisor, manager, director, what have you, that it's a form of training, not membership, because in the government, membership is a more sensitive issue in terms of approvals. It helps in recruiting new members because they didn't realize, oh, my membership will be refunded. Are you aware, like for not corporate, but community clubs, and that if receipts, is that a selling feature, a way of also recruiting? But can they claim training via receipts that the club would issue? Is that a good help to sell or close the sale?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. I personally get reimbursed, and I attend a community club. It doesn't need to be a fancy receipt. I like to get a stamp from the bank that just puts a little bit of more formal stamp on it with the name of your Toastmasters club, and then you can get a receipt book from the dollar store or whatever. And a lot of times you can get reimbursed. I mean, to a company, this is a very economical form of training and learning and development. So for sure, I would encourage people to bring that to their workplace and talk about how it fits, with their personal objectives for the year as well. I do know that a lot of corporate clubs out there have now become community clubs, even though they reside in a corporation. So the different nuance to that is that maybe the company doesn't actually pay directly to Toastmasters International. And sometimes they accept people from outside their company to come in and join the club. So that's even more prevalent for clubs like that.
It's about keeping momentum going. You get people out to a meeting, they get signed up, they give you their check. And lately, I've been finding the last 5 or 6 people that we've had, they peter out pretty quick and they end up not attending anymore. In the past, we used to give them their CC manual and give them a copy of it, and they would take off. And when they got theirs in the mail, they would return one to us. Now we don't have that. That momentum seems to be being lost right away. Mm-hmm. That enthusiasm. And they're not doing speeches, and they might do their icebreaker sometime in the next 2 or 3 months, where in the past it was always done. I'm the VP of Ed, I'd schedule them for the 3rd week. They do their icebreaker. Yeah. How do you maintain that momentum now? It's kind of a controversial thing most people aren't talking about, but we've lost 5 of our newest members in the last 8 months because they just quit showing up. The enthusiasm was gone.
Yeah, I have certainly seen that as well. So things that we have done to rectify that. So first and foremost, I will say, have a guest kit. And again, that guest kit, there's so many things that you can put in there. Obviously, information about Toastmasters. I'm sure we could do a whole webinar on guest kits. But so you have the membership form in there. But I like to actually print out the first 2 projects out of Pathways. They are the same for all the paths, so you're very safe to have them work on those projects. So I have the Icebreaker project because that's a PDF that's available. And then project number 2 actually has 2 speeches. You write one and then you repeat it. And you also try a speech evaluation. So that way then you have the material in front of them right away. Of course, you want to get them logged into Pathways as quickly as possible. You want to show them how to complete the level. There's a fabulous webinar on how to do that. So I would always encourage them to do that. But I also like to have it in hard copy just so that they can look through it even as a guest, just to see what the projects are like. And then the other thing I'll say is absolutely get them to do their icebreaker very quickly, because obviously they've joined on a high and you want to keep capitalizing on that high. And you also want to encourage them to do other roles. So, we think about these other roles that we have in our club meetings. I mean, you can have upwards of 20 people doing a different role if you have maybe even 5 different table topic speakers. So you want to try and make sure that they are actively signing up for roles and that they understand how the roles will help them in their communication and their leadership development as well. So I think the reason people leave is because they don't make that connection to their goals and to the options that they have on a meeting by meeting basis, because obviously they're not going to do a speech every meeting, but they can be speaking at almost every meeting as well. So those are just some things that I would recommend to consider.
Well, I've been doing that with everybody and trying to get them to do their icebreaker, but I get them, they do their icebreaker. They always do other roles because we're a small club, but the momentum within 3 months is gone. That enthusiasm, they don't have when I joined up, I got that book. I was so enthusiastic. I jumped right into it and had a whole bunch of plans and did all that stuff. And I watched lots of people do that. But everyone we've had sign up recently, as much as I get them involved, they peter out. I'm looking for something new.
Okay. Another option that has worked really well in some of the clubs that I've seen is the mentorship program. So what we do actually as part of the registration form is we attach a questionnaire at the end that asks very specifically what their goals are with joining, asks how often they want to speak, just a few things like that. And then on top of that, we are starting to partner them right away. So a new member should always be partnered with a mentor. That mentor doesn't even have to be like a long tenured Toastmaster. It's just someone who's really engaged and wants to help others get up to speed. But having that mentor is, again, that one-on-one connection, a little bit of an accountability partner, someone who really understands where you're trying to go with your Toastmasters experience. So I do think that the mentorship program is another great avenue for clubs to consider as well.
Hi, Kimberly. It's Monique. Hey, just to gather on the mentorship thing, I believe one of the challenges is that sometimes mentors are going through the motions and not really embracing just how fortunate they are to have mentees. I find in the last couple of years having 2 or 3 mentees under my guidance. What I've done is have them come to my home, all 3 of them. And that way it's a learning experience for all levels of the mentees that I have. So those who have not even done their first speech yet to the other one who might have started their third. And it's an overall learning experience by way of a tag team approach. And you throw in a glass of wine or 2, and then the learning experience is even better because they loosen up a little bit. And having mentoring sessions outside of the club environment in a more relaxed might get them more engaged, and hearing others who are being mentored struggling at the same time is a double whammy for them. And I find that to me worked out the best as a mentor, bringing them in as a tag team versus only a one-on-one, which I still do, but I find that there's an added energy boost being able to share the pain and the joys equally. So that's an idea.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that approach as well. Thanks for that, Monique. I have a question here on the text from Naomi. I don't know if Naomi's still online, but she's wanting to ask a question about Meetup.
Okay, hi.
Hello.
Thank you so much. I am passionate also about recruiting new members. I believe that the survival of any club depends on the number of members, and the more, the merrier, the better. So I'm grateful for all the information you shared. I don't know if I heard you speak about Meetup or not. And if you haven't, have you had any experience with Meetup and any success? It's like Eventbrite. As you say, it's 30% of the people who register will come. But I don't know with Meetup if people do pay attention to information about Toastmasters and if they do show up.
So I have used Meetup to a certain extent, not extensively though, because there is a cost involved with that one. To varying extent, if you're willing to commit longer term, that is of course cheaper. I do think Meetup has brought a lot of clubs success though, so it's definitely an option to consider as well. It's nice in that it actually sends notices to people with similar interests as well. So if you have the budget, it might be worth exploring as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
I have a question. This is Sue.
Hello.
Hi, Kimberly. I have a question. Actually, it's kind of in connection to one of the previous callers that asked about losing the momentum. I don't know Pathways. I'm not on Pathways, but I know that in the old program where we had the CL manual, we had members work on their CL manual if they're not presenting speeches. How is that adapted in the Pathways program?
So it's a little bit of a different setup. Again, I'm not overly expert on all aspects of Pathways, but I do know that there is an option in Pathways to identify all the dates that you have filled in those meeting roles. From my knowledge of Pathways, the only meeting roles that are actually included in a project, it's the speech evaluator, which is in your project 2 on level 1. And then in another level, there's also a table topics facilitator. So those two are still embedded in the program. The rest of the spots, again, are you just log when you have completed those roles, but they don't contribute towards a Pathways level from my understanding. I have completed a level, and that's been my experience with the pathway that I have gone through.
Interesting, thank you.
No problem.
Well, thank you, Kimberly, from all of us.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thanks so much for tuning in.
Thank you so much. Bye.